I recently spoke to career coach Shannon Post about finding your own way to get to what you specifically want in life. And before I play that interview segment, here's about a 2-minute piece about Shannon and what she's accomplished in her life. Also, I will tell you that at the end of this interview segment, you can get to bonus material with Shannon Post where she talks about her move to Alaska. So definitely stick around and look for that link. I want to introduce you to Shannon Post. Here's a quote from her website. Finding the work you love is an act of rebellion that will change the world. Now, I've known Shannon a long time, so I can tell you she truly believes this. I knew Shannon when she first moved to New York City because she wanted to fulfill her dream of being a classical singer, which she achieved. And then she decided she wanted to fulfill another dream, mushing dogs. I'm not joking. She just turned to me one day and said, I'm moving out of New York City. I'm going to Alaska. And I was like, what? She goes, yeah, I want to mush dogs. And I'm like, what? She goes, I'm moving where it's nice and cold. So she left and moved to Alaska, and she mushed dogs for a prominent Iditarod racer. Then she later went into corporate America and became a CIO, a prominent executive in IT. And now she runs her own business out of Alaska as a career coach. Her current dream that she fulfills every single day is helping people at all points in their careers achieve their dreams. So why am I bringing a classical singer, dog musher, CIO career coach on this show? It's a good question, but it's simple. She understands all the obstacles you face when you pursue what you want. It's not easy to get to do the things you love, but you can get there. And she knows that it's hard to do it on your own, and she understands how skills translate across different pursuits. So I thought it would be great to bring her on and show you, there's no magic wands and fairy tales and easy, woo, I just want to do it so it happens path, but there are ways to move yourself forward every single day and get to what you want. She's done it over and over again. So I look forward to you meeting her. So Shannon, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming on. I know I know you're crazy busy, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk to people. Shannon is not a filmmaker. Oh my God, we have a non-filmmaker on, but she looks great on camera. So hey, so Shannon's on because she's a career coach, and Shannon, I wanted to ask you because you are a master at finding your own way. You've changed your career many times, as we've seen in the video before. And I was just wondering if you could offer some tips or thoughts about it, whatever comes to mind.
Sure. I would say the first thing that I can give as advice for people is when you're trying to find your career path, and I've reinvented it many, many times trying to figure it out. Really be careful whose advice you're listening to. It really matters who you are and not what is hot in the industry, not what people think you should do, not what your parents think you should be doing. It's really a self-discovery journey of who you are and what you want. We have so much advice these days that's the first thing that I would tell people is really hone your filter down for what you're looking for and really see if you can cut out a lot of that noise of what you quote unquote should be doing versus what you want to be doing.
So that's great. So then I guess my follow-up to that though would be what are some tools a person could use to filter all that out? Because I know for me, sometimes people give me advice and then it gets in my head and I'm like, are they thinking that? Am I thinking that? Where am I getting that from? Like, how do you just take a step back and kind of break it all down for yourself?
In general, unless you know that person really well and you know for sure, even when you know for sure that they have your best interest at heart, realize that most people are giving advice that they need to take. It's usually not advice for you. It's usually advice for them, or it reflects their past history, things they need to work through. So for an example, people will say, oh, you can't make money doing that, or you can't do what you love. Like you have to go to work and do what you love later. Sometimes that's not true, but often it's just a reflection of their past experience. And even if it's well-meaning advice, I would always point somebody inward, even if it's getting in your head as best you can. You have to figure out what you want. And it's really hard these days because we have so much noise with all of our access to media and everything. But just realize that most people's advice is either advice they were given, that's often bad advice, or it's advice they need to take. It's not for you.
Not for me. Awesome. One less thing in my mind.
Yep.
That makes me happy.
It's kind of like, oh, that's fascinating about you. That's good to know.
Good to know. Glad
Yep.
you. Yeah, it is hard, and you really have to figure it out for yourself. You can have people around you, right, to support you, but it is figuring out for yourself. And I know we won't get into this here because I'm going to post a link, but I know you have some great tools for that. Now, once a person figures out what they want to do, there is that sort of balance. Like, for example, if you're frustrated in your day job and you just want to quit because you want to be a jewelry designer, right? But you are barely starting out, you have to pay for your supplies. Do you just quit your job? Because I know what I want to do now.
It depends on who you are and what your background is and how much money you have. That's almost everything I'm going to say is it depends, because it does. And I would be hypocritical, and you know this, if I said you shouldn't just up and move, because I just up and moved from New York to Alaska. There was some planning there. I don't think anybody saw it. There could have been more planning, but it depends. Do you have a huge trust fund? Go for it. If you don't, I'm not one of those people, so I really have to make sure I have my bills paid. I don't have anybody to fall back on. So there are ways to meet in the middle ground. What I often tell people is start looking for the signs that you're unhappy at work, like you're complaining, you're throwing your boss under the bus, even if they deserve it. If you think something's off in your job, it is. Like, just trust yourself in that and start making an exit plan now. It's never too early to start making an exit plan from one job to another. It gives you more buffer so that one time your boss comes in and says, hey, I don't like this thing you did, you don't just slam the door and burn the place down and ruin your reputation and ruin all your connections and ruin your network. You really want to start paying attention and trusting what you feel inside. Don't think it's just going to get better all by itself. It will not. Jobs don't magically heal themselves the way that other things do. But I would say starting that middle ground so you can start the transition, because starting a business takes a long time. It takes capital, it takes a lot of personal resources, and there is a period of time where most people have to bridge both.
So that's great. And I feel that way too, especially for artists of any kind, certainly for filmmakers, unless, of course, you do have a trust fund or a spouse that's supporting you or some other means of money where you don't have to work, and good for you, yay. But
it's awesome.
Yeah, it is. But if you don't, you do have to figure out a way to balance it. And I think a lot of times, I know I've felt this way, and I know other people do. You feel like a failure because you're not earning money or a living as an artist. But if you're actually doing your art and you're paying your bills somehow, and it's not killing you, I think you're quite a success because you are doing it and you're making strides forward. And it's a question of when you can make a bigger jump.
Yeah, I think there's so much bad advice and quippy things that you'll hear on the internet. There's two that I hate most. Is one from the artist side that says, like, if you're that you're selling out, like if you have a bank job or you're waitressing, you've sold out and you're not a real artist. I heard that all the time in my 20s, and I was like, I don't know, I like to eat. I didn't really take that advice to heart. But on the other side, on the business side, you'll hear, if you're not making a profit, you're not a business, it's a hobby. And if you look at some of the large businesses, they haven't made a profit in a long time. So the profitability is not always a marker of success, especially personally. Are you happy? Do you feel like you're not burning out? Because having a corporate job and running a side hustle and if you have a family, and if you have a pet, and if you have all these other things, you're really looking for sustainability. And just working a job that you hate, that doesn't allow you to do your art, is not sustainable. Only doing your art and not being able to pay your bills is not sustainable. Doing all the things and running your personal energy down is not sustainable. So it's finding that middle ground, that is not a cut and dry. There is not a like 5-step way to do this. And if it was, we'd all be doing it. That if it was easy, we wouldn't be talking about this.
If I had a genie in a bottle, I would say, my wish is that you come up with a 5-step miracle for me in my life, right?
Yeah. And we buy the miracles over and over and over because they're so seductive, but it just doesn't happen that way.
One of the things that kind of segues into, right, is do you conform, right? Because there's a lot of pressure. I can say as a filmmaker, there's pressure. I was just talking to another wonderful filmmaker who's actually directing television now after like 30 years of pursuing her dreams.
I love that.
It's amazing, and it's good for her, and I wish she had it sooner, but it is what it is. It's an achievement. And but we were talking about all the things along the way that filmmakers are told to, well, you have to get into Sundance, or you have to play this, or if you don't do that, you're not successful. And in order to get in, this is what these 10 people did, so you do what they do. And I have to say I've tried to do that, maybe only for 5 minutes, because you know me, it's like, I don't want to, I'm not going to do it, I'm sorry. But, I've seen other people really, really try and force themselves. And I was just wondering if you could talk about that, because a lot of what you're saying is it's very individual, right?
It is. And I will say that advice is true in every industry I've been in. So I've been in the arts industry. I've been in tourism industry. I've been in the tech industry. I was an executive. You hear it over and over, and like, you must follow these 3 rules to be successful. You must behave like this. And the answer is sometimes. It depends. Does it go against your values? That's a huge one. That's not sustainable. You cannot override your values for very long without it eating away at your soul. What's the benefit? Like, what's the payoff? If I wear a suit jacket to work because that's the standard, is it going to rip my soul out? Or is it like, that gives me a little credibility, it's pretty easy and cheap, I'll just do that? Versus, and I guess the third is that really who you are? Can you sustain that? So if this very regimented, you must become somebody you are not, goes against who you are as a person, you're not going to be able to sustain it, and you will burn out. And you'll think you hate your art, and you don't. You hate that you become somebody that you aren't, because you just can't fake that. For example, I'm not a good Monday through Friday 9 to 5 person. Like, it makes my soul die. I feel the air seeping out of the room. Like, if you told me I had to do that for the next 30 years, I'm not sure what I would do. But because it's just not who I am by nature. So I can do it for a little bit. And so thinking as a filmmaker, like, can you do it for a little bit and there's a payoff? Great. You could try it, see if it, works for you, but there just aren't rules. That's not how things work. And it's especially not how it works anymore. Like, maybe back when you and I were starting, there were more rules that were hard and fast. Like, you must read backstage. That's where all the auditions were. Like, yeah, that was where all the auditions were. But these days, the industry changes so quickly. And sometimes, especially if you're an innovator, none of those rules will apply to you. And you'll actually waste your time trying to follow them.
Yes, I will actually give the example of, I tried to write, which I love Hollywood films. I do love a lot of Hollywood films. But in the beginning, when I first wrote my first feature screenplay, I tried to write a romantic comedy, beginning, there's an instigating event, and 20 pages in this happens, and another 20 pages in that happens, whatever. I don't even remember what the freaking rules were because it didn't work for me. It was like the worst thing anybody had ever written on the face of the earth. I actually referenced it in my first feature. It was called "Have You Dated This One Yet?" And
I remember that script.
Yes, and I actually referenced it as the character says, I wrote a book called "Have You Dated This One Yet?" It wasn't very good, and anyway, that doesn't really, but my point of it all is that I was trying to do what I'm supposed to do, and I ended up throwing the whole thing out and just turning it all on its head, and I made a crazy non-linear multi-genre film, which for better or for worse was me, and
Right.
I think as an artist you put so much time and effort in, you really need to be you, because if you're not, then you're just going to be so unhappy later, because it's like, I made this thing that doesn't even represent who I am, and it's probably crap to be honest.
And in art, what's the point? If you're not, art is about expression. Art is about a lot of things. One of those is expression. And it's your unique perspective of the world. Not like, if I just make a reproduction of something else, I've made a reproduction. I tell this to singers a lot when I work with, they'll come to me because they're like, my voice falls flat. I'm like, that was me. All the advice is like, beautiful instrument. It's not unique enough, because I didn't know who I was, and I couldn't even figure out how to find out who I was. And nobody had advice for that back then. But I could sound like anybody. So good studio singer, but a good representation, like I could mimic, but it wasn't unique. And so and there's a place for that. Cover bands. I don't know if there's a place for that in film where you just like, is there cover filmmakers?
Well, there are filmmakers who make films that are like so-and-so.
In the style of.
The same style, the same writing style. They basically take that script. I mean, what it feels like to me is they'll take a script that's been made 40 times and make a 41st one of the same kind of thing.
And in art, there's almost no point for that, especially. Like if you're going to go in business and just replicate something, fine. But art is special, especially filmmaking is like, it's really special. And if you're just reproducing something, you're probably not going to make the shift and the change in the world that's actually possible. And I think that's a big thing that we're not told. Like if you're not who you are authentically, you're not actually making the change that's supposed to be happening. So
let's talk about that a little more, because I know you talk about this a lot. Like every job that I'm paraphrasing, you will say it better, but every job you have is you could be changing the world with what you're doing through your authenticity or your belief system or how you do it. I don't know. I'm throwing it out to you.
Yeah. I mean, there's different ways to think about work. Some people just hate their work, and that's fine. Like, I'm not really here to judge that, but there is a perspective about work, even if you don't love the work, that it can make big change. I was just listening to a story where there was a customer service story. Like she found somebody's luggage, and and they were like, "Oh my God, you have no idea." What a difference it made. And it seemed like a really trivial thing, but how we approach work can matter as much. We can make a big shift in the world through our work. To me, work, maybe because I was raised as an artist and I still am an artist, that to me, work is just an avenue to create change. It's just another medium. Painters paint with paint, business paints with money. But you can affect a lot of really positive change through your work and through your self-expression, whether you're a filmmaker or you're working at a day job to support your filmmaking. Both of those things can make positive change.